Hi, love. Welcome back to Around the Kitchen Table, the podcast where we gather, remember, and reconnect. This is your weekly dose of wisdom, connection, and a little reminder that you are never alone on this path. I'm Laura Island, and today I want to talk about something that has been really alive for me lately: expectations, and how they so often shape the way we speak to each other, especially when we're hurting. So have you ever had one of those moments where someone says something and it just lands wrong? It might not be the words themselves, it might be the energy behind them, the silence after them, the way it felt. And all of a sudden, we're spiraling, triggered, reactive, sometimes before we've even had time to pause and check in with ourselves. I wrote about this in our blog this week, how our expectations can become these invisible scripts that we hand to other people and then feel hurt or angry when they don't follow them. But the truth is, most of us don't even realize that we're carrying these expectations. Some things happened recently to me, and maybe they'll resonate with you too. And I take a big breath and a big sigh because actually these things really touched me and really reminded me of that painful place, especially with us as women, when we end up kind of really deeply hurting each other through the pointing of fingers, through the space where actually we don't take a moment to consider what those words and actions are going to impact on another. We're not even really thinking. I call it the fog, like where you've read a text message or something's been fired off quickly and suddenly it's like the fog rises. A teacher of mine used to say to me, you have the most honed defenses, Laura, of anyone I have ever met. And I used to think, what does she mean? What does she mean? And then I realized that what she meant is that my defense is the first thing that comes, roaring sometimes, before I've even had time to kind of consider, wow, what was actually meant by that? What was actually being said here? What expectations perhaps were not being met or were not being spoken of? So a beautiful situation has happened and occurred this week where somebody that was doing some work for me had an expectation of something and my expectation was different. And because I hadn't met her expectation, she sent a message to me that was pretty kind of cutting. It was like quite hard to read, but she didn't see it that way. She just saw it as stepping up into her power and her truth. My reaction to that then was met with a reaction from her that was like, wow, that was really hard. I don't know how to take that. And actually, in reality, we just haven't handled a business transaction very well because we're women. We don't work in a man's linear world that says, is there a contract for this? Have you agreed this? Have you done that? We just like, it was a verbal agreement. My brain kind of forgot some of that verbal agreement and it was never checked in on. And so she doesn't feel like I valued what she did, which is totally not the case. And I didn't feel that actually our agreement had changed because I hadn't even clocked the time of the day or the connections that we were having. So there was an expectation that wasn't met. And then it becomes a kind of tussle of like words. She said, she said, she said, she said, like this happened, that happened. And actually, in reality, I'm also coming from a place of that old wound in me that says people don't listen, I never get heard, like, I thought I was clear and I wasn't, here we go again, all that kind of stuff. And there's clearly a wound that she's kind of working through as well. So most of us don't even realize we carry these expectations, and then when they're not met, when someone doesn't really respond how we hoped, when they don't see us the way we want to be seen, something gets activated. Often it's an old wound, a deeper story, something much older than the moment that we're in. And when that happens, we don't speak our truth. We speak from the pain, the hurt. We lash out. Or more, we become avoidant and we shut down. And we say things that we don't really mean, or we don't say the things that we do mean. We don't connect with the part of us that says, ouch, that hurt. Can we speak about this differently? Can we find another way? So this is really, for me, why Sacred Sister has a sacred code. You know, we call this kind of moment the crossroads. It's like the invitation back to the sacred code. The sacred code is our agreement to kind of pause. You know, did your mum ever say to you, just hang on, count to 10? And you thought, what's she on about? It was that lineage of wisdom that says, if you just wait a moment, you're going to think about this completely differently in 10 seconds' time. So the sacred code is our agreement to pause, to breathe, to take responsibility for our own energy before we send it flying out into the world. It's a commitment to not speak from the wound, but from the wisdom that lives beneath it. It's not about perfection. It's not about always getting it right. It's about awareness. It's about choosing to respond from love, not reactivity. So when we honor the sacred code, the sacred agreements that we have, and the reason these agreements for me are so powerful, not just in what we've created within our sisterhood, but how we actually show up in every day, in our business, in our relationships, in our relationships with our children, in our lives, in how we communicate with the shopkeeper. Like when we come really back to that place, we're really honoring our own truth and the humanity of the woman in front of us. We're saying that actually, you know, you matter. I value you too. We honor totally that woman in front of us. And we remember that healing happens not in the explosion, but in the repair, not in the quick reaction, but in the honest reflection. And I think more than anything, this is the medicine that we need right now. Spaces where women can show up raw and real, but also take radical responsibility. Because sisterhood without accountability is not a safe place to be. And accountability without compassion isn't healing. So today, if you find yourself activated, if someone's words land wrong or you feel that old sting rising, I invite you to pause. Ask yourself, what's really being spoken underneath this? What's mine to hold? What am I expecting? What were my expectations from this space that we've created together? And how can I come back to a sacred code, to truth, to care, to connection? You know, what is my sacred agreement with myself? First and foremost, your connection with you is the most important one. So before you go out into the world, consider how you want to show up. What are your sacred agreements? Do you want to live with compassion and kindness and love? Non-judgment? I mean, let's not pretend that judgment and shame don't exist. Let's just attain to kind of rise to something different. So when we see judgment or we feel judgment, we can say, okay, I can see that, I can feel that, but I'm not going to go out there and, you know, shoot off from that place. I'm going to come home to myself, reconnect with myself. Usually these reactions come from a place where we've left ourselves. What we've heard is icky, and so we leave, we abandon ourselves, and then we feel abandoned. And then when we feel abandoned, we want someone to blame. That's old patterning and behavior, because all of us are born only knowing two things, love and fear. And if it's not love, it's fear. As soon as we come into this world, we are almost instantaneously brought into fear. Who's going to feed us? How am I going to look after myself? Where am I going to sleep? There's bright lights if we're born into a hospital environment. It's loud, it's noisy. There's voices I don't recognize. Suddenly, straight away, we're in that place. So my belief is that all we're ever doing is trying to get back to that wild, precious, sacred heart we were born with. So every time a confrontation arises, every time something comes up that we have to look at or consider, every time we are met with somebody else's expectation or our expectation that hasn't been met, recognize it as a deep place for you to come back in, touch into those healing places. And that doesn't mean you walk around all day long with a journal under your arm. I mean, you might. But it doesn't mean that you have to constantly be in the process. Life is a process. Healing happens when we are just being real in life. It doesn't happen because we have to instantly sit down and go to therapy every time something happens. Recognizing these things, showing up for yourself just as they arise, that's where the magic happens. So if this resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, join us inside Whispers from the Hearth, which is our Friday love letter filled with the blog, the podcast, and all the behind the scenes heart of Sacred Sister. You can sign up there through sacred-sister.co.uk. And if you're also feeling the pull, our Sacred Sister Sanctuary is now open for founding members. And this is the space where we live the sacred code together, where we practice, where we mess up, where we repair, and we keep coming back to love. And you can join us now. The doors will open on May the 1st, but you can join us as a founding member and step really into the movement from the roots. Check it all out on our website. Until next time, sit with your sisters, speak with love, and remember, you are so deeply worthy of connection, even in the messy moments. With love, always. Take care.